Hello and welcome to the SWS CBSE Class 12 English course. Today we are going to look at this chapter called Deep Water, written by William Douglas, who went on to become the advisor to the President of the USA, President Roosevelt. He was also a lawyer, and before that he was a teacher, and he was the longest serving justice, retired after 36 years as a legal luminary. Now this excerpt is taken from Of Men and Mountains. Now what kind of a story is this? This is basically the story of what happened in his childhood, his fear of deep water. The illustration that you see right on top, it kind of indicates to you what we are talking about. This is about a child who is drowning, and that's what he recounts, the many incidents, and at least a couple of incidents from his childhood which left a major impact on his mind, on his psyche, on his emotions, as a result of which he was always extremely scared of swimming, fishing, canoeing, anything to do with deep water bodies. Okay, this is based in the USA. At least in the beginning, it is placed in a place called Yakima, which if you look at the map, is on the western part of the USA, and it is located about 140 miles south of Seattle city, right? Those of you who are from an ICSE background would recall the chapter called Chief Seattle's Speech, which you had studied in class 9 in Treasure Trove textbook. Seattle, the city named after him on the western coast of USA. So this is about 140 miles south of Seattle city. So as I said, this is about his fear of water and what he does in order to overcome that fear. Please remember this phrase because that's what you would need to use a lot in your answers. Okay, we will talk about that. This is the note about the author, about who I have just now told you. So you could just go about that. Of Men and Mountains, that's where this particular excerpt is taken from. So autobiographical in nature, another word that you should use in your answers. Okay, all these word meanings, we will do it when we are studying. It had happened when I was 10 or 11 years old. Okay, so first he's talking about when he was 10 or 11 years old. And then he will take you further back in flashback, but we'll come to that. I had decided to learn to swim. So right at the beginning, he's kind of getting to the point straight about what this particular chapter is all about. There was a pool at the YMCA in Yakima. YMCA is the Young Men's Christians Association. Okay, so that is something which you would need to know. But the chapter says YMCA, so you're pretty sure, but you should just know the full form of YMCA as also. You would find that in many cities in India as well, the YMCA centers, right? YMCA, and there is also YWCA. Okay, in Yakima, that offered exactly the opportunity to learn to swim. So you realize that that's always been a passion with him. The Yakima River was treacherous. Treacherous means as in dangerous, right? And why was it dangerous? Mother continually warned against it and kept fresh in her mind the details of each drowning in the river. So Yakima River was treacherous because there had been many cases of drowning, many incidents of drowning which had been reported from Yakima River, as a result of which parents would tell their children not to venture anywhere near the Yakima River. So Yakima River was out of bounds as far as learning to swim is concerned. Otherwise, many people learn to swim in ponds, in tanks, in small lakes, and then they venture out to the river, right? But the YMCA swimming pool would be the perfect opportunity. But the YMCA pool was safe. Okay, now this is also interesting. Was it really safe, right? That's a question I've written in the answers also. Okay, that's a question I've written in the question answers also. It was only 2 or 3 feet deep. This detail you need to know about how deep it was. It was 2 or 3 feet deep at the shallow end, that is the end which is not very deep, where you actually step into the pool. And while it was 9 feet deep at the other, by the time it went in, it was almost 9 feet deep. But the kind of, the gradient was kind of, it was not very sharp, gradually it kind of kept going down like the way typical swimming pools are. And while it was 9 feet deep at the other, the drop was gradual. So you will not like go from 2 to 3 feet directly to 9, 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7. That's how it will go. I got a pair of water wings in order to help him in swimming, and went to the pool. I hated to walk. Now this is the diagram which has been put in your book. You can have a look at it. About the Yakima River is a tributary of Columbia River in eastern Washington, USA. Now eastern Washington is not the same as Washington DC. Do not get confused. Here we are talking about another Washington which is in the western part of USA. Okay, so just be careful. Don't say, "Arey sir ne to paya tha western coast, yahan pe eastern likha hai," so don't get confused. The state is named after the indigenous Yakima people. Okay. Naked into it and show my skinny legs. So he's always very conscious of how he looks, but I subdued my pride and did it. From the beginning, however, I had an aversion to water when I was in it. Aversion means a bit of a dislike, a bit of, you're not very comfortable with it. So this started when I was 3 or 4. Now from 10 to 11, he is now talking about what happened when he was 3 or 4 years old. And father took me to the beach in California. Okay, again on the western coast of USA. New York, Washington, DC are all on the eastern coast. He and I stood together in the surf, while the waves are coming up, right? I hung on to him. That is, I caught him very tight. Yet the waves knocked me down and swept over me. And yet it was very ferocious that the waves kind of knocked me over. Obviously, he's just about 3 or 4 years old. I was buried in water. So you know how the things happen on the beach. My breath was gone. I was frightened. Father laughed, but there was terror in my heart. This is an important phrase. At the overpowering force of the waves. So that was his first experience of the waves, of deep water. And obviously, it was not a very pleasant experience because he got buried in the water. Please remember all these kind of key phrases which you can use in your answers. His breath was gone and he was terrified of the overpowering force of the waves. My introduction to the YMCA swimming pool revived unpleasant memories and stirred childish fears. So when he went to the YMCA swimming pool, though the YMCA swimming pool was nothing like what he had experienced at the California beach, yet it kind of revived the same fears of water. He's scared of seeing a mass of water, a water body. But in a while, I gathered confidence. I paddled with my new water wings, watching the other boys and trying to learn by aping them. Aping them means copying them. I did this 2 or 3 times on different days and was just beginning to feel at ease. That is, he was beginning to feel comfortable in the water when the misadventure happened. And then the misadventure happened, and the large part of the story deals with this misadventure as to what really happened, which kind of put the terror of water inside him. Okay, so that's what we will be talking about. I went to the pool when no one else was there. Okay, there was nobody at the pool. The place was quiet. The water was still, and the tiled bottom, the way the swimming pools are, at the bottom, there are tiles, square-looking tiles generally, was as white and clean as a bathtub. I was timid. Now, timid essentially means frightened, nervous. I was timid about going in alone, so I sat on the side of the pool to wait for others. So, nobody was there that particular day, morning. So, one assumes it was morning, and he sat on the side of the pool because he was a little scared to venture inside all alone. I had not been there for long when there came a big bruiser of a boy, that is a big bully kind of a person, a very rough kind of a person, probably 18 years old. So he was 10 or 11, and this boy was 18. Okay, so he had thick hair on his chest. He was a beautiful physical specimen. Okay, specimen almost used specimen is used generally in biology kind of laboratories, right? So he's kind of being a little, because of the experience with him, he's trying to be a little derogatory about him, referring to him almost like a specimen, that, a specimen of a typical bully kind of a person with legs and arms that showed rippling muscles, a typical rough looking guy. He yelled, "Hi, skinny." So he is referring to him as skinny. He has kind of noticed his physical appearance. How would you like to be ducked? That is thrown into the water. With that, he picked me up and tossed me into the deep end. That is the end which is directly 9 feet deep. I landed in a sitting position. That is, he threw him out, so he kind of landed as he was sitting, right? swallowed water and went at once to the bottom. I was frightened, but not yet frightened out of my wits. What does it mean? That he's saying I was frightened, but not frightened, means not frightened out of my wits. This particular phrase, not frightened out of my wits, का मतलब है that I was not terrified. If I say I was frightened out of my wits when I saw the figure in the night, when I saw a ghost-like figure in the field at night, it means you are terrified. So please remember this phrase. So he says I was scared, but I was not like terrified. Terrified is a higher degree of fear. On the way down, I planned. Okay, as he was going down the 9 feet, he planned what he will do. He thought when my feet hit the bottom, the tiled bottom, I would make a big jump. That is, he will kind of put the force and he would kind of come up. Physics you have read. He would come up inside the mass of water, come to the surface, lie flat on it and paddle to the edge of the pool. He had learned to paddle, right, with the water wings. So he knew a bit of it. He had done that for a few days, 2-3 days. So he had a bit of a comfort level with it. So that as he went down, his mind was working on that plan. Did it succeed? Did it happen that way? It seemed a long way down. Now that 9 feet depth, it seemed like it was taking very long for him to hit the bottom of the swimming pool. Those 9 feet were more than 90. He felt as if they were more than 90. Amount of time it was taking, he was kind of feeling a little as though, it is not kind of going very fast. And before I touched bottom, my lungs were ready to burst. So because obviously he was not able to breathe. But when my feet hit bottom, I summoned all my strength and made what I thought was a great spring upwards. I hope you're getting that, right? That is, you would be, I'm sure you're able to imagine what I'm talking about or what the author is talking about. If this is the swimming pool and this is the guy, okay, so he wants to touch the bottom of the swimming pool and then put pressure on the legs, on the feet, in order to have a spring-like reaction so that he can come out of this thing. This is, as we know, it is 9 feet of depth. Okay. I imagine I would bob to the surface like a cork. What does it mean? Like a cork, you've seen the cork on top of a bottle. It kind of comes up. Okay. Instead, I came up slowly. I opened my eyes and saw nothing. So, but the spring-like action did not happen the way he had imagined it would happen, right? He did not really spring up like a cork. Okay. So he kind of, cork is, this thing, release it, it kind of goes up. Okay. But water that had a dirty yellow tinge to it. Okay. I grew panicky. Now, yellow is generally happens either by algae or by mixing of iron content, which is usually used in swimming pools. Okay, you would be aware of it. Any one of you who goes for swimming in a swimming pool, you would be aware that many of them, especially the municipality swimming pools, they have a yellow touch. Either they would have mixed iron or it would be dirty because of algae content. I reached up as if to grab a rope and my hands clutched only at water. So he thought he would clutch something, but it was only water. Okay, so nothing to hold on to. I was suffocating, lack of breath. I tried to yell, but no sound came out. Then my eyes and nose came out of the water, but not my mouth. So he could not so he was not able to succeed in coming out of the water, even though he tried his best by jumping from the bottom of the pool. Now, this is the first attempt. Just write one and write those kind of notes so that you are able to distinguish between the many attempts that he will make in order to come out of the swimming pool. I flailed at the surface of the water. Flail means to move around without actual proper control. He's just moving around, but he's not having control over his body in order to be able to escape the water. I tried to bring my legs up, but they hung as dead weights. He felt as though the legs were having too much of weight and they were kind of pulling him down. He was not able to come up. Paralyzed and rigid. Paralyzed means not able to move. Rigid against means very, very stiff. A great force was pulling me under, as though somebody was pulling him from down under. I screamed, but only the water heard me. That means nobody heard him. His voice was really not coming out. He felt he was screaming. He felt he was shouting, but there was no sound actually coming up. Only the water heard him. Nobody outside could hear him. Not that anybody was there at that point in time. I had started on the long journey back to the bottom of the pool. So after that first attempt, he's again sinking. He's again drowning inside the swimming pool. I struck at the water as I went down, expending my strength. Expending means exhausting my strength. As one in a nightmare fights an irresistible force. So what is the irresistible force? The water body, the mass of water. And his feet are feeling paralyzed, they are feeling rigid, so he's not having much strength in his legs. I had lost all my breath, my lungs ached because they're short of oxygen, right? My head throbbed, having a headache. I was getting dizzy, that is, he was feeling very, as though he's going to faint. But I remembered the strategy. I would spring from the bottom of the pool and come like a cork to the surface. So he wanted to attempt that once again. I would lie flat on the water, strike out with my arms and thrash with my legs. Then I would get to the edge of the pool and be safe. I went down, down endlessly. I opened my eyes, nothing but water with a yellow glow, dark water that one could not see through. So, if it is yellow water, it may not be dark, but this is all also his imagination, the fear, the terror, everything coming back to him, and his lungs not having enough oxygen. So he's feeling extremely suffocated. And then sheer stark terror seized me. Terror that knows no understanding, terror that knows no control, terror that no one can understand who has not experienced it. So these lines are important because that give you a sense of the extremity of terror and fear that he's experiencing at that point in time, because he's thinking he will die because he's not able to escape from that mass of water, right? I was shrieking, and he says nobody who has not experienced that will be able to ever understand what I was feeling. I was shrieking underwater, shrieking again, screaming, right? I was paralyzed underwater, stiff, rigid with fear. Even the screams in my throat were frozen. Only my heart and the pounding in my head said that I was still alive. So he knew he was alive because his heart was beating and there was, his mind was working, but his other body parts, especially his legs, were not really keeping pace with his attempts to escape. The sound was not coming out of his throat, right? So he was, in that sense, feeling terrified that death is staring him in the face. And then in the midst of the terror came a touch of reason. I must remember to jump when I hit the bottom. At last, I felt the tiles under him, So he has felt the tiles once again. My toes reached out as if to grab them. I jumped with everything I had. So he once again tried to do that cork kind of movement, spring kind of movement in order to escape. But the jump made no difference. Again, the jump was unsuccessful. Because why? Because his legs were paralyzed. He was feeling rigid. His legs did not have enough strength in them in order to be able to traverse the journey of 9 feet. I looked, the water was still around me. I looked for ropes, ladders, water wings, nothing but water. A mass of yellow water held me, right? Held me means, it's almost enveloping him. Stark terror took an even deeper hold on me like a great charge of electricity, right? So he's comparing terror with electricity as though, चारों तरफ एक तरह से बिजली है, which has encompassed him. समझ गए? You can imagine the kind of fear that you would feel. Just put yourself, in fact, this can be a kind of a question, right? Put yourself in the shoes of William Douglas. You are 10 to 11 years old, let's say 6 years old, 7 years old from where you are right now, and you underwent a similar experience. What would you do? What would you do? Describe your emotions at that point in time, how terror struck you would feel. Just close your eyes and think of yourself in the same situation. You will be able to empathize with this story and what this boy is going through very well. I shook and trembled with fright. My arms wouldn't move, my legs wouldn't move. I tried to call for help, to call for mother. Nothing happened because he was enveloped by water all around him, right? And then strangely there was light. I was coming out of the awful yellow water. At least my eyes were, my nose were almost out too. Then I started down a third time. The second time also he was unsuccessful. First time, second time. Just write it in 2 separate tables so that you are able to remember all the keywords. What did he do during the attempts to escape from the swimming pool? If you are asked to write, if you use the keywords, that will make your answer look better. At least my eyes were okay. I sucked for air and got water. The yellowish light was going out. Then all effort ceased. Cease means stopped. I relaxed. Even my legs felt limp. There was no strength in his legs. And a blackness swept over my brain. He was kind of passing out. He was getting unconscious. It wiped out fear. It wiped out terror. Now, when he was he was getting unconscious, he was losing consciousness. It meant there was no more fear. There was no more feeling of terror. There was no more panic. It was quiet and peaceful. So, panic, terror, fear. Please mark these words in your book so that you use these words. Okay. Nothing to be afraid of. This is nice. To be drowsy, to go to sleep. Drowsy means, neendana. You feel a little, almost as if you're going to close your eyes and sleep away. No need to jump. Too tired to jump. So, it's almost like, reconcile to the end. He thinks this is the end. My body is not coping. I'm not able to escape and I'm feeling drowsy. I'm passing out. I'm feeling unconscious and I'm going to sleep, right? It's nice to be carried gently to float along in space because that's what he's kind of getting the feeling inside the mass of water. Tender arms around me, tender arms of the yellow water, tender arms like mother. Now I must go to sleep. So this is almost like a death wish. He's realizing that he's not able to escape from that swimming pool. I crossed to oblivion and the curtain of life fell. Oblivion means, to almost endlessness, right? And the curtain of life fell. He thought he had died. The next I remembered, I was lying on my stomach beside the swimming pool, vomiting. The chap that threw me in saying, but I was only fooling that, I was just playing a game. Someone said, the kid nearly died. Be all right now, let's carry him to the locker room. So they wanted to kind of administer first aid, etc. Several hours later, I walked home. I was weak and trembling. I shook and cried when I lay on my bed. I couldn't eat that night. For days, a haunting fear was in my heart. The slightest exertion upset me, making me wobbly. Wobbly means, feeling weak in the knees and sick to my stomach. So, because he had kind of obviously taken in a lot of water, spent so much time inside that yellowish water, and that entire feeling of fear and terror that, he had. वो नवाजुद्दीन सिद्दीकी का एक डायलॉग है ना कि मौत को छू के आ गया kind of a thing. So it's like that. He has gone and touched death and come back that close. I never went back to the pool. I feared water. I avoided it wherever I could. So this kind of put the fear. So if you get a question about whether the swimming pool was really safe, you know exactly what to write. His mother thought it was safe, safer than the Yakima River. But here there was nobody to supervise on a day, as a result of which that bully of a boy actually put his life at risk. Threw him into the water and put him at risk. A few years later, when I came to know the waters of the Cascades, I wanted to get into them. Cascades, another part of USA. And whenever I did, whether I was wading the Titan or the Bumping River or bathing in the warm lake of the Goat Rock, so different places have been mentioned. You don't really need to remember too many. Two places you need to remember. One of them is this warm lake. The terror that had seized me in the pool would come back. So every time he would see a water body, he would remember what had happened in the swimming pool. It would take possession of me completely. My legs would become paralyzed. Icy horror would grab my heart. This is an important phrase. Icy horror. Okay. Because he felt that kind of a feeling inside the water. This handicap stayed with me as the years rolled by in canoes on main lakes, fishing for landlocked salmon. Salmon is a kind of fish. Bass fishing in New Hampshire, trout fishing on the Deschutes and Metolius in Oregon, fishing for salmon on the Columbia at Bumping Lake in the Cascades. Wherever I went, the haunting fear of the water followed me. It ruined my fishing trips, deprived me of the joy of canoeing, boating, and swimming. These three you need to remember. So any kind of water sports or water associated activities, he's not able to undertake because every time he sees a water body, he's reminded of what happened when he was 10 or 11 years old. I used every way I knew to overcome this fear, but it held me firmly in its grip. Finally, one October, I decided to get an instructor. He decided to learn swimming all over again. He decided that why should I be deprived of the joys of swimming, fishing, canoeing, etc. every time, because I remember what happened when I was a child. So he decided to get a swimming instructor and learn to swim. And this time, this person seemed to know how to go about it. And he seemed to understand that he needs to first get rid of the fear in William Douglas' mind. I went to a pool and practiced 5 days a week, an hour each day. The instructor put a belt around me A rope attached to the belt went around a pulley, through a pulley that ran on an overhead cable. He held to the end of the rope and we went back and forth. So he kind of allowed him to go back and forth over the swimming pool, right? As he kind of controlled. So he kind of did it step by step in order to first help William Douglas overcome the fear of the mass of water. He held on to the rope and we went back and forth across the pool, hour after hour, day after day, week after week. On each trip across the pool, a bit of the panic seized me. So every time he would be going over the pool, he would kind of feel the same kind of fear. Each time the instructor relaxed his hold on the rope and I went under, some of the old terror returned and my legs froze. So every time he would go inside the water, the same feeling of the legs going paralyzed would come back. It was 3 months before the tension began to reduce. Then he taught me to put my face underwater and exhale, right? Release oxygen, release air, and to carbon dioxide, and to raise my nose and inhale. I repeated the exercise hundreds of times. Bit by bit, I shed part of the panic that seized me when my head went underwater. So if you get a question as to how he kind of overcame his fear, you need to write from this particular paragraph that the instructor this time took him step by step. He kind of guided his way. He did not, unlike the earlier swimming pool where there was nobody to guide, here he was there all through with him, helping him to overcome his fear and telling him how to exhale, how to inhale, and helping him get comfortable with the water more gradually. Next, he held me at the side of the pool and had me kick with my legs. So you should, if you get a thing about the safety of the first swimming pool, you should also be able to contrast it in order, if you get a longer kind of a question and answer, you should be able to contrast it to give your answer more meat. Next, he held me at the side of the pool and had me kick with my legs. For weeks, I did just that. They teach you to kick with your legs, right? At first, my legs refused to work, and it was more important in the case of William Douglas. Please remember this, because his legs were the ones which were not cooperating with him. He felt rigid, his legs felt paralyzed every time he came in contact with water. But they gradually relaxed, and finally, I could command them. Command who? Command his legs. So the mind was able to control the legs. Thus, piece by piece, he built a swimmer. This is an interesting line. He built a swimmer, because he realized that this particular boy had kind of crumbled as a swimmer. So he needed to create a swimmer out of him. So piece by piece, he created a swimmer. He built a swimmer. And when he had perfected each piece, the legs, the mind, the breathing, everything, the arms, he put them together into an integrated whole. In April, he said, now you can swim, dive off and swim the length of the pool, crawl, stroke. So he said, now you can do so. I did, the instructor was finished, right? So he said, done. But I was not finished. I still wondered if I would be terror-stricken when I was alone in the pool. I tried it. I swam the length up and down. Tiny vestiges of the old terror would return. Vestiges means, something which is remnants of the past, right? Something which is, in this particular case, is referring to old memories, right? So, but now I could frown and say to that terror, trying to scare me? Huh? Well, here is to you. Look, and off I would go for another length of the pool. So now he's able to kind of challenge the fear, saying that मैं तुमसे भी डरने वाला नहीं हूँ. I'm not going to be scared of you anymore. So he was able to challenge the fear now. This went on until July, but I was still not satisfied. I was not sure all the terror had left. So I went to lake. Now these are the two lakes that you need to remember. Lake Wentworth in New Hampshire, dived off a rock dock at Triggs Island and swam 2 miles across the lake to Stampak Island. I swam the crawl breaststroke, side stroke and backstroke. Only once did the terror return. When I was in the middle of the lake, I put my face under and saw nothing but bottomless water. The old sensation returned in miniature, means very little of that old sensation returned. I laughed and said, well, Mr. Terror, what do you think you can do to me? It fled and I swam on. So it's almost personifying terror because he's constantly talking to him. So if you get a question about how the literary device used vis-a-vis terror, you need to talk about personification and use the two dialogues, this one and the one before that on the last page, where he's talking to terror and say that, no, you cannot scare me anymore, right? So he overcame fear like that. That's the big lesson from the story, that he did not say that, अरे नहीं, swimming नहीं करना, ठीक है चलता है, मैं ऐसी जिंदगी काट लूंगा. No, he did not give up. Never ever give up. That is the big lesson from this story. Overcome your fears. If you are scared of something, challenge the fear. Don't say that, okay, I will be scared and kind of stay confined to your space. No, challenge the fears, because there is nothing that a human mind cannot overcome. Understand that. Yet I had residual doubts. At my first opportunity, I hurried west, went up to Titan, to Conrad Meadows, up the Conrad Greek Tail to Mid Glacier, and camped in the, I mean, you don't really need to know all these names, too many names. Okay, by the side of the Warm Lake. Okay, so Wentworth and Warm Lake, these are the two names that you need to remember, where he kind of finally overcame his fears. The next morning, I dived into the lake and swam across to the other shore and back, just as Doc Cochran used to do. I have no idea who he is. I shouted with joy, and Gilbert Peak returned the echo. I had conquered my fear of water, right? So with an echo is like the world telling him, yes, William Douglas, you have overcome your fear. The echo is important. He shouted, I have overcome my fear. And the echo comes back to him, as if the world is kind of confirming, yes, sir, this is certified. You have indeed overcome your fear. So that's important. Like, it's like Mother Nature telling him. The experience had a deep meaning for me, as only those who have known stark terror and conquered it can appreciate. In death, there is peace. When you are dead, there is peace. You are away, you have gone away from this world. There is terror only in the fear of death. When you know that, oh, death is going to come, then you are scared of death, because no one really wants to die. No one wants to, however miserable existence you are leading, you do not want to give up upon it, because you are hopeful of a turn for the better. As President Roosevelt knew when he said, all we have to fear is fear itself. सिर्फ डर से डरना चाहिए. सिर्फ डर से डरने की जरूरत है. Nothing else. Because I had experienced both the sensation of dying and the terror that fear of dying can produce, the will to live somehow grew in intensity. So since he had experienced death very close, and he had experienced the fear of the possibility of dying, the will to live, that the desire to live, was that much stronger in William Douglas. At last I felt released, free to walk the trails and climb the peaks and to brush aside fear. So that's how, instead of deep water, it could have been, the title of the story could have been Conquering Fear, right? The battle against fear, winning over fear, right? That is what this story is all about. So never ever give up in your life. I've written a whole lot of question and answers for you. So you go through that. It should be easy. Any doubts you ask, but I think I have kind of explained all the word meanings which you need to know, and also marked for you which are the compulsory keywords that you should highlight and where your specific answers need to come from, and you should be able to deal with it. All the best to you. Thank you very much for your time.